Good morning, everyone. So today is Ask the Expert, episode 2 of our Ask the Expert series. And today we have Ariella Lew joining us today. And Ariella, she was our expert in episode 1. And today she's joining us to talk to us all things bedwetting alarms. I get questions all the time about bedwetting alarms. So, bedwetting alarms. And also to answer some questions. So if anyone has any questions, they are more than welcome to ask them as well. So Ariella, thanks so much for joining us again.
Hello, great to see you.
You too. So I get questions all the time about bedwetting alarms, and particularly recently because I've been sharing the story about my son and the health journey he's on. Questions about bedwetting alarms come in a lot, and I've even had a few people saying, what are bedwetting alarms? So why don't we just start there, and if you can just tell us what bedwetting alarms actually are.
Okay, so bedwetting alarms are basically, the easiest way I would put it is it's the tech version of waking your child up at the time that you know they need to go to the toilet, right?
Okay, awesome.
And okay, that is what I would say it is. So instead of you having to set your own alarm to wake your kid up when you're guessing that they might go to the toilet, when they start to go to the toilet, this is an alarm that will go off. That, in a nutshell, is what it is.
Okay, great. And I've actually had my own experience with them because when I was 9, I used a bedwetting alarm. So I have experienced it myself. So they have been around for a long time. No doubt the technology has changed, but that was around 30 years ago now. So they have been around for a while.
Okay, they have. And I think, when you look at the research says that bedwetting alarms will help 80% of kids once they are over 7. And I'm sure later you're going to talk about whys and the whens and what are the indications. But I think the bedwetting alarms are something all the continence clinics are recommending. And I think if people take nothing else away from today, whatever alarm you choose or that you're recommended, there are 2 main types, which I'm sure we'll also get into. But whichever actual brand you choose, they're all of them, it's going to be, your rule of thumbs are, your kid's got to be over 7, they've got to be motivated to want to do it, otherwise it's not going to work. And it is going to take 6 to 8 weeks for consistent success. So you've got to be ready as a family that this, again, no matter what alarm you choose and what tones you set it to go off at and which kind you want to go with, in a nutshell, what you're going with, it's the same process.
Yeah, interesting. I think people probably do get hung up on that, like which one's best, which one should I buy? But it's such a good point too, because when we were considering using an alarm for Leo, I thought about it and I thought, okay, it's the middle of winter. I'm struggling to get up as it is and I can't be bothered getting out of bed. Am I prepared to be getting up multiple times a night in the middle of winter to possibly change his sheets and things like that? So you're right that it has to be a whole family thing. It's not just, we're going to get in the alarm and it's going to work. It's a huge time and energy investment from families as well.
Absolutely.
And you have to know from the outset that this is going to disrupt my sleep as well as my child's for possibly the next 6 weeks or so. So that really mentally prepare, am I prepared to do that? And if you're tired already or you've got stuff going on and things are a bit stressful and you think I can't handle broken sleep for the next 6 weeks, it's probably not best to do it then. Absolutely. And wait until you're ready.
It's not the time. And I'm going to wait for you to guide the conversation and we may come back to this. But one thing I think is really important is when you were talking about waking multiple times a night, one of the rules of thumb that you would generally be advised, particularly by the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne or a lot of the continence clinics, is once they're up twice a night, that's it, alarm's done. Like, as in, not done forever, but I think for me, and this is anecdotal, so the Children's Hospital may disagree, but I think where I would be recommending something like an alarm is when most nights is one wake up or one set of sheets, occasionally two, but if you're still getting multiple a night and you still kind of think, I cannot have this nappy off, you've never had a dry night ever, that may also be an indication that they're not yet ready for alarms, because it's also broken sleep for them, which of course, once we're talking about the over sevens, that can have an impact in school, and that can have an impact on socialization, and that can have an impact on their behavior and their mood. So you've got, you know, it's one thing if it's kind of saying, right, you go every night at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, let's find a way to get you up, or you go at 11 o'clock at night and then at 5 in the morning, so they've still got a certain amount of sleep in the middle. But I think if you're finding that, you know, either you're changing sheets multiple times a night, or you're waking up in the morning and the nappy is just saturated, you're probably not quite there yet.
Yeah, interesting. And I think when you say that they should be over 7, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that because before 7 it's still considered to be normal to be wetting the bed at night?
Yes. Yeah. Or it's still considered to be within the realms of those normal hormonal patterns and whatever else is going on. I also think, not that anyone's written this in the literature, but I also think that above 7 is where kids become much more aware of wanting to do something about it themselves.
Yeah. And I guess sleepovers are maybe starting to happen, and school camps are kind of starting to come up. So that's probably a good time to start thinking. So if you then have a child who is over 7, wetting the bed at night, and your GP or your friends or whatever have mentioned a bedwetting alarm, when would be the right time to do it? Is there anything that you need to do before you get your bedwetting alarm, or just go straight into it?
So I think you need to make sure that, you know, you mentioned your GP's mentioned it, or your P's mentioned it, or your friends have mentioned it. I think you need to make sure your child wants it. So I really think, and, you know, in all the literature that you read, in all the studies, in all, you know, whether you're looking at the quantitative or the qualitative literature, it's all talking about the need for the child to play a role in this. So, you know, we'll talk about the mechanics of the alarm and how it works and all of that. But even in that, if your child, rewards aren't going to work with an alarm unless your child actually wants to get out of bed, right? Yep. If that was working, that would work without an alarm. So I think the first thing is you've got to get your child's buy-in. And using an example of something like a school camp, if you know that in November there's a school camp and it's something they're starting to worry about, then yes, in August, September, maybe it is time to say, you know, do you want to give an alarm a try? You know, something like that. And that's when, but I think without, because they are over 7, and we're not talking about toilet training your toddlers where, you know, chocolates and the figurines and whatever may get you over the hump. But I think because they are over 7, we have to have their buy-in, because otherwise, again, it feels like it's being something done to them rather than something that they are an active part of.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think we probably forget about that. Like, as a parent, we think, what do they need? What do they need fixing? And we just kind of put what we think onto them. But I think we probably don't think to say to them, are you interested? Would you like to give this a try? Because you could be surprised. They could be like, nah. You know, they could be happy enough to do what they're doing. And so if they're not invested in that, wanting to make that change, then as you said, it's not going to work. And so the other thing that no doubt you'll mention, but just with my own son, so we thought alarm because he's nearly 10, he's wanting to get out of night nappies. Next year will be a school camp, so we're thinking, all right, let's give this a go now. I did an alarm, let's do it. And I had a few people, and I think you were one of them, Ariella, say, we just need to make sure there's no underlying health issues, because if there is, obviously that's going to affect the alarm working or not. So we got Leo checked by the GP just to be sure, just to tick the boxes, thinking everything will be fine, and then we can start the alarm. And then we found out through an x-ray that Leo has severe constipation, which can affect bedwetting. So I think it's really important that people do get checked first by their GPs to make sure there is no underlying health issues, because no doubt if there are, then it's a complete waste of time, energy, money doing this bedwetting alarm if there is a medical reason that's causing it. So I think that's, that's something I've really taken away from our journey recently, is get the checks done first. Don't just think, go to the alarm. And it's really actually scary to think that I've had so many people saying the advice their GP has given them is try the alarm first. But doing that first is the wrong way around. They need to have checks done completely. And the checks even some GPs do, and it's tricky as parents because we trust our GPs. But my GP felt Leo and they said, yep, he feels normal. And they asked him questions. They said, Leo, do you go to the toilet every day? And he said, yeah, every 1 to 2 days. And the doctor said, okay, that's normal. Is it easy or hard? He said, easy. So based off what Leo was saying, he didn't seem to be constipated. He didn't feel constipated to the GP. So he was sure that he was fine. And it was only that I pushed and said, my physio, incontinence physio recommended getting an x-ray. Right at the end, he said, okay, I'll give you a referral. Turns out he's got severe constipation. So it's one of those things that, it's easy for them to say, go straight to the alarm, but really make sure there is nothing going on underlying that could be causing it.
And I'm smiling, not at your story, but at the fact that, first of all, I remember when we chatted about it, I think it was on email, and I said to you, check 1, 2, 3, 4, and one of them was constipation. And even you as a mum said to me, no, I really don't think that's an issue. And what the story of your GP is so common. If you're going through your pediatrician or a continence clinic, which some people may be in for whatever reason, if there are other medical things going on, it's one of the things they will do as standard before they would get you on alarm. All those medical checks would be done. And I think, again, one of the things I'm the most passionate about, for anyone that knows me, is advocating for my clients and for people to have the education and be empowered. But I think as parents, sometimes we forget that actually it's not the doctors don't know, they do know, that they're not invested the way that we are as parents. So, feeling confident as a parent to say, look, I'm happy to take your advice on the alarm, sounds great, more than happy to do that. But could we just double check? My child's 8, and I don't know whether to trust them or not about how they're going, and also for your son saying something like, yeah, it was easy. Well, it probably is easy because he's used to it.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really important that, as we talked before, we trust our children and we involve them, but we also need to trust our gut. And I think normally, if there is something like an underlying constipation or an underlying bladder capacity issue or an uncontrolled diabetes or something like that, the reality is, yes, an alarm will help, but then you're very unlikely to have only one wetting in the night. It's much more likely to be you're still getting the saturated pull-ups in the morning and the stuff like that. So I think it's sometimes about putting the pieces of the puzzle together as the person who knows. Because you see all of it. The GP sees the bit that you give them on the day you're in the consultation room.
Yeah, exactly. And because, like I said to you, I said, Leo eats such a great diet. He eats so much fruit. He drinks lots of water. He's very active. And I remember saying he's definitely not constipated. We'll just tick it off the list. And when it came back, I nearly fell off my chair. I just couldn't believe it. So just goes to show that, and kids, when they're answering questions and they're a bit nervous too, and they're like, so you don't, and because when they're over 7, we're not normally in the toilet with them, helping them wipe anymore. So we're not seeing what's happening. So that was a big shock, but thankfully that's been checked. So if you've had all your medical checks done and they're all clear and you're ready to give the bedwetting alarm a go, then what?
Okay, so first I think it's important to understand there are 2 basic different types of alarms. I'm not going to get into brands today because I really think that's a personal choice and that's going to involve what's your budget and, how do you feel about wires. I also think, the kids who have different sensory issues, so that needs to be a personal choice. And I would also, when it comes to that, I would also really advise people and caution people, don't just go with the one your friend has. Don't just go with the one that your doctor recommends. Really do your research, because even the cheapest ones, they're not cheap, right?
Yeah.
This is not a cheap outing. And if you want it to work, you know, there are some kids I've worked with that they get the alarm and even the little clip on their underwear, they just can't tolerate it. So it's not, it's really about figuring out which is the right one. But basically, simplified, there are two forms. The one is the bell and pad alarm. So that would involve having like a mat under the sheet, and then the bell, which is separate from the bed, and it doesn't involve any sensor on the body. So basically, the sheet itself is what would trigger the alarm when there's a wet incident, and there's no specific little things attached to the body. Again, they come in different shapes and sizes. So that's one. It's called the bell and pad alarm. And that is the one generally favoured by places like the Children's Hospital, people that have been trained at the Children's Hospital. A lot of people who have a background in incontinence and disability will go with those because the sensory issues tend to be less.
Yeah. And that's the one I use, and I'm pretty sure that we hired it from the Children's Hospital, so I don't think you actually have to buy that one.
You don't, and if you are under a continence clinic, they do have alarms to hire, but they don't have unlimited supplies. So for some parents, and you know what it's like as a parent, you want to do it and you want to do it now. And if you're told, yeah, sure, we'll put you on the wait for an alarm, but it could be in 4 months one will come free. Some parents just decide we'd rather just buy and do it our own way. So that's someone. The other one is what's called a body worn or a personal alarm. They're often called a personal alarm, where basically you have the sensor itself that clips onto undies, and then you have the bell trigger that clips onto the top of the pajamas. So it's physically warm, and then the sort of unit is, again, separate from the bed, but that's the one that your child actually wears. Both of them work in the same way. So when your child goes to the toilet, an alarm will ring. Again, different brands have different sorts of alarms, and also from a sensory perspective, thinking about what's actually going to wake your child. For the very deep sleepers, you may need the super duper loud alarms. The kids who can't take the noise, from a sensory perspective, there are ones that do vibrating or have sounds of the sea, or even, you know, there was one you sent me, that's the alarm where you can record parents' voices into them. So all those different things. And the idea is that your child will then wake up. The reality is, for the first couple of weeks, it's going to be you as the parent that wakes up, wakes your child, and then your child needs to go to the toilet. Now, what they won't say in the literature is that particularly at the beginning, your child probably isn't going to have more wee right there and then to do in the toilet. So it's really about training the brain when they start to feel wet, just like they would in the day at the beginning of a toilet training journey. They kind of do a stop and then they sort of hold it, run to the toilet. It's really about training them to do that at night. And so the thing is, parents will have a role, particularly at the beginning, as I say, in waking them up. But once you've woken your child up, the rest needs to be your child. They need to get out of bed. They need to turn the alarm off. They need to go to the toilet. They need to change their undies. Everything else needs to be them, because that's how the brain will get trained.
Okay.
And that's why we need buy-in from the kids, because that's where it is different. So, you know, what we talked about, the idea of a dream wee or an early morning wee, that's just a case of keeping the bed dry. But if we actually want to fully train them, they've got to feel the sensation of being wet. They've got to understand they get up, they go to the toilet, they change it, and that takes time. And that's why it's a 6 to 8 week process.
There you go. Interesting.
Some may be quicker, but
but
it's unlikely to be, you know, 3 days. And then basically within 2 weeks, though, within 7 to 14 days, you should see some dry nights. Okay. And then the general advice is, once you've seen 7 dry nights in a row, you try a night without it. Once you've had 2 weeks in a row, you're done, and they're trained.
Great. So if in that, so after 7 days, if they're dry, and then you try without it, and it's got to like 5, 6 days without wetting, and then they wet, do you go back to the
We go
alarm?
back to the alarm till we get 7 days again, and
Okay,
then
yep,
we go from there.
yep, and that, I guess that's what can make it 6 weeks, because there could be that kind of
Correct.
using it, non-using it, using it. Yep,
Correct.
okay.
And I think the other thing, sorry, just to say is, with a bedwetting alarm, a bedwetting alarm does not mean your child is going to go from night to morning without weeing.
Yep.
Right? So a bedwetting alarm really works best when you know for sure they're going to wee. Like, you know, most nights they wee. It doesn't mean they have a dry night in terms of needing the toilet. It means they have a dry night in terms of wetting machine.
Yeah. Yeah. So if your child doesn't have any kind of sensory issues, would you go straight to the alarm that's warm, or which is the first one that you would kind of recommend if kids are just, you know, fine with sensory issues, they don't worry, they're not too fast? Would you go straight to that one, or would you still go to the pad and bell?
Interesting. I think, to be honest, if it was my child, I would look at the alarm itself. I would look at the noises, and like, it doesn't make a difference to you either way. You're looking at two models, one of each, and the costs are the same and everything's the same. I would look at what noise is more likely to get your kid up and not disrupt your whole house.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it really is just a personal choice then of what you think your child would like.
And that's what I was saying at the beginning. You know, you're going to read the sales schmooze on all of them, and, you know, and that's what they're there to do if you're buying. And the truth is, as well, if you're going through your continence clinic, you're not going to have a choice. You're going to get what they hire out. It's not going to be a choice.
Yeah.
So if you're hiring, you're going to get what you're going to get what you're given, and then it's about how it works with that. If you're buying, then they're all pretty much personal preference as to what's important to you. Some have wire, as you know, as we were discussing last week. Some have wires, some use Bluetooth, some don't. So it's really what are the things that are important to you for your child's sleep environment.
Yeah, and I guess that's good to remember too. So when you're looking up different brands and stuff, it's not really worth looking up their success percentage, because that's really just the alarm in general. All alarms will have a similar success rate. It's really looking at the features, whether it's got wire, no wire, a pad, what the sound is, things like that. So I guess that's the thing to look at, not the success rate, because that's just alarms in general.
And it's interesting because last week when I was doing the research, you know, doing some research in this lab, sort of jotting down some notes, I looked at quite a few different brands of alarm, and you know what, every single one quotes a success rate of 93% and above. So now, but remember, it's 93% of the sample that use that alarm. It's not counting as 93% of all children who are incontinent overnight. So I think it's about saying they're all going to say it. No one's going to put on the website, this helps 50% of the kids that use it, or no one will buy it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think when you even said 80% before, like, I think people just think alarms, you know, is going to work. That's what they have to do. But it's important to understand that it actually won't work for all children. It is a good tool if there's no underlying health issues and that kind of thing. It is a good tool, and it does have a good success rate, but not necessarily all children it will work for.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, a couple of other points to really remember is, first of all, your child needs to know what they're getting into. So it's not just about the motivation, whether it is, most of the alarms have a video attached to the website that they do. The Royal Children, certainly for the ones they rent out, have videos. I think it's really important to watch that with your child.
Yeah.
And also, most of the alarms will have in them a way to test them. So whether that is using the mat with salty water so your kid can hear the alarm during the day, they know what they're listening for. I think that's really important. So on the one hand, they've got the motivation, and that is super important. And once they are motivated, you can then link, when you woke them, did they get up? That you can link to rewards. Once they're motivated, you can link it. But I also think it's important that they know what they're expecting. We think about when we toilet train our toddlers. When you toilet train toddlers, in my experience at least, you will have the most success when your toddler knows exactly what's expected.
Yeah.
Where's the toilet? How long do they need to sit for? How do they wipe? How do they flush? How do they wash their hands? Where is their poo or wee going? That's when you will get the most success. Whereas if you pull off the undies and just stick them on the toilet, you maybe, but you'll be lucky. And I think it's the same with alarms. Kids need to know exactly what's expected of them and what's going to be.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it's also really good to mention too, if you are going to use rewards or stickers or anything like that, that it's the behaviors that you're asking them to do, not the did they wee or didn't they wee, because that's what they can't control.
Correct.
But they can control, did they turn the alarm off? Did they put their pants in the laundry or whatever it is that you come up with? But as you said, if they know what's expected, if they do those things, then rewards can work well, but not about the did you wee or not wee, because that's out of their control. It's then if they did or didn't, what did they do after that you've spoken about beforehand.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think also, just like with any new skill, making sure you remind them. So before they go to bed, they should be the ones that put on the alarm. They should be the ones that you say, now remember, if mummy hears the alarm, or daddy or whatever, I'm going to come, I'm going to get you, I'm going to come and wake you. This is what I then want you to do. The kids who do well with visuals may even be worth a visual on their wall. When I wake you, it's this, and then this, and then this, and then this. So they know it's ready to go. The other thing which sounds very, very obvious, or maybe doesn't, is the alarms will not work if your child is wearing nappies.
Yep.
So
okay.
For your products, I would say before someone's going to use an alarm, having a product like yours is vital.
Yeah. Yep.
And because you cannot use alarms with nappies.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Because obviously the idea of a nappy is that they don't feel wet. So that's going to go completely against what the alarm's trying to do. Yeah. And I remember when I was younger, mum didn't have a product like mine. I just had the plastic kind of tarp sheets, which meant if I did wet, then it was the whole sheet, the whole plastic sheet that had to come off, redo it in the middle of the night, and it made things a lot longer and harder as a kid having to go through all that. So nice little plug for my business there. Thanks, Ariella. So are there any other points or anything else that you wanted to let people know about before they're thinking about the alarm journey?
I think just the last things I would say is, first of all, really going in with realistic expectations. This isn't going to be 2 nights of an alarm and the whole thing's fixed. And I also think, again, your child's buy-in, make this about your child. Don't make this about what you need as a parent. This needs to be about what your child is wanting. And I think the last point is, make sure it's, like you said before, this is a good time. Do not do this when you're about to have a new baby. Do not do this when you're about to move house. Do not, because buy-in needs to not just be from your child, but there will need to be parent involvement, particularly at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just lastly, do you have any idea of like rough kind of costs, what people could expect to pay for alarms?
So in the ones that I was looking at last week, again, it depends on, what you're getting with the alarm, and some of them have disposable sensors, some of them don't. From the research, and again, this is very rough, I saw anywhere from kind of the 175 all the way up to the 400.
Yep.
I don't know if that fits in with sort of what you
saw. Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. I think it's just good. It's just good for people who might be thinking, have no idea how much these would cost. What would it roughly be? So it's a good. That's and that's what I found too. So it's between that kind of 175 to 400. And as you said, it's not about the more expensive ones are going to work better. They might just have different features or, stuff like that. It's not actually a better alarm as such. They just have different features and come with different things.
And one of the features that some of them do have, more expensive, not all, is that they do have a dedicated team who will troubleshoot with you while you're in the process. That's also something to think about. The ones, and not specific ones, but there are ones that have been made and designed by people that are trained in continence. Paediatric continence, paediatric nurses who worked at the continence clinic, stuff, urologists. There are, and then there are others that are just like, okay, we can design the sensor and we can design the whatever, and here it is.
Yeah, and I guess that will depend on who you're working with. If you're working with a continence clinic, you won't need that extra program that it comes with. But if you're doing it just from home on your own, then that's something to think about if you think you need that extra support.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ariella. And can people contact you? Do you support people who might have kids who are going on this journey? Is that something that you help people with?
Absolutely. And generally, if someone phones me about toilet training overnight, the first session is really about troubleshooting. What are the options and what are your child's specific circumstances to really see, is this the way to go or not? We can also help, if you don't have the time to kind of narrow it down from 500 different alarm brands, we can do some of that research for you based on what your preferences are. We can help with all of that.
Perfect. Well, in the comments section, when we end this video, I'll put your website and your page so people can find you as well. And I've on my website, I did a review of 5 of them. That's just a good quick read that just kind of goes through a few if you don't know where to start at all. But thank you so much for your time, Ariella. I know it'll really help people. Awesome information.
Amazing. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Ariella. Bye.
Bye.